Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, a podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. And now your host, David Ginsburg.
Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Tales from the Fandom. It is hard to believe that we are halfway through the month of October. We have 2 more episodes for this month scheduled. Next week is the crew from the Actual Play podcast, Dungeons and Dragons. And then the week after is with Sam of Dova Designs, a cosplayer here in the Florida area. Just as a FYI, to stay on top of the latest news and information on who I'm recording with, podcast schedule releases, anything that goes on with the podcast, make sure to go over to our Facebook page, facebook.com/talesfromthefandom, and give it a like and follow us so that way you can see which episodes are coming out every week and just get a jump on it. We also have a Patreon page, which is patreon.com/talesfromthefandom, where you can support the podcast for as little as $1. And by doing so, as several of you have done already, I've actually been able to buy a new microphone. It's actually sitting here still in the package, and I will be opening it up because next month, November, I will be doing a lot of recordings. I think I have a recording scheduled every day that I have open, and we will be getting a lot more releases and information on who's recording and when they're going to be coming out to kind of load up for the next couple months, as I normally do. But I'm really excited for some of the people that are coming on. It's going to be an absolute pleasure to talk to them and, of course, get the episodes out to you. I wanted to also thank you for continuing to download and subscribing to the podcast, because without you listening, there wouldn't be much of a show for me. So I greatly appreciate it. And if you're interested, I do have t-shirts available. You can go to tpublic.com, or there's links on our Facebook page, and you can check out some of the logos that are available on the shirts, as well as a few other designs that I've created. I am not an artist, but I've done my best. Anyway, enjoy the episode with Kat, aka the Panzer Mom. She was my first guest that I had that I found on Twitter, and it's just a lot of fun. And of course, as always, I support independent podcasts as much as I can, so take a listen to these promos before the episode starts. Thank you all, and have a great day.
Hello, folks. Have you ever wished you could have an easy way to find gameplay videos and podcasts, or just media in general that deals with your favorite White Wolf role-playing games? Or have you ever wished you could find a forum to share gameplay that you have recorded, one which wouldn't be drowned out by random posts and discussion, so that your media could get the attention you want? Well, we have the answer for you in a Facebook group we run called White Wolf RPGs Gameplay and Media. The group is specifically ran with the sole intent of it being a one-stop shop for people to view or share media involving the games we all love. We take thorough steps to ensure the page does not become cluttered and is easy to traverse. We are currently over 1,000 members strong, and we are continuing to rapidly grow, with new media being shared every day. Stop on by. We hope to see you there.
Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, the podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. Today's guest is someone who I just happened to meet on Twitter while discussing her future Dungeons and Dragons character that was a paladin of the Morrigan, or the Raven Queen, and I happened to respond to her and tag one of our mutual favorite authors, as it turned out, Kevin Hearn, who did Druid Chronicles and was a guest on this podcast. And from there, I know I followed you and you followed me back, and I think we've had a few exchanges. So welcome to the podcast, Kat, or as you might be known on Twitter, the Panzer Mom.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you. I think you're my first person that I've had on that I've met just strictly from Twitter, because normally I get people from Facebook or Instagram, and I've been trying to be more active on Twitter, and here you are.
Yep. And I think I only use Facebook and Twitter. So Instagram is is a realm that I have not dived into yet.
It is a realm that is, I use it to promote the episodes and do like all the crazy hashtags, and that's pretty much about it. And then random pictures of like whatever that I happen to take, and I'll throw them up on the personal Instagram page.
Right.
Now, Kat, you are into a number of different fandoms. So what are some of those fandoms that are like the strongest for you right now?
Right now, the strongest, if we're speaking about TV, that would be the Vikings TV series. I'm a huge fan, been watching it since the beginning, and it trickles into my own life from my love of the Iron Age and the Dark Ages. My family and I are huge fans of tabletop wargaming. So for right now, we are into bolt action in a big way. So both my husband and my son, who's 16, we all play. We've got a campaign going on for Battle for the Ukraine. It's the Brits, the Germans, and the Soviets. So we're fighting for different places on the map. And the Germans seem to be taking a beating at the moment. So I've got to come back soon. And we're also into D&D, and we are just now getting into Saga, which is another tabletop war game where the Vikings and the Irish and the Anglo-Saxons will be battling. So we have all sorts of games. We're big board gamers, also video games. My husband and I play Sniper Elite. We also just now started playing Ark. Again, they have a Ragnarok map, and so for like the last week, all three of us have been going crazy playing Arks. So it's been a lot of fun.
Awesome. Now, out of curiosity, when you guys play these war games, do you guys hold grudges and you carry it into the next game? Like, oh, you did that, I'm going to pay you back in the future.
Oh, yes. Mostly between my son and I, it's really funny. We are very competitive. So when we start playing, it gets really serious. That started because we started gaming. He was 6. And my husband, who's from the UK, he was living in Wales at the time. He's actually from Belfast, Ireland. We met online, and so we were back and forth for a couple of years. When we decided to get married and he came over, one of the things, he wanted to find something to connect to Kobe with, who's my son, and that was gaming, because his dad had the sports thing. So we started a weekly game night, and we started simple. We started like with Ticket to Ride, Settlers of Catan, moving into Dungeon Command. And over the years, it's just grown, and it moved into tabletop gaming, which was where we're actually, with bolt action, it's not just the game itself. You have to build your armies, paint your armies, you're building scenery. So our house doesn't look like a normal house anymore. It's like this big craft area. So with miniatures and terrain everywhere. So we're running out of room.
Now, I've not heard of bolt action, but I've seen the pictures on your Twitter. Is that a traditional war game style game, or is it something a little bit different?
It is a historical war game. So bolt action is based in World War II. They have all of the big campaigns. Warlord Games is the company that puts out bolt action. So you can have, they have the Battle of Normandy, there's D-Day, there's Market Garden. So they have historical books that go along with the games that they produce. So for ourselves, we were very interested in World War II, and this was a game that my husband had been wanting to dive into for a long time. So we had started with Dust, but Dust kind of fell through with all of the Kickstarter issues that they had. So we broke down, and we each got a starter army for bolt action. What I didn't realize was that we all had a passion for the history. So not only are we building our armies, we're building our terrain. I've found us watching, documentaries on World War II and reading books about the German soldiers and what they experienced on the battlefield, as well as the British paratroopers or the Soviet tank riders. So it just became a passion. So our games, basically, we're not following any of the campaigns that Warlord offers. We've kind of taken it and kind of created our own. Like I said, we have a campaign going, which is the Battle of the Ukraine. So it's kind of a twist. We follow the Bolt Action 2 rules, but we're very much role players, so it's a very narrative game, whereas some players don't play like that. It's strictly just a strategic game. But for us, we're bringing storyline into it, so it's a lot of fun.
Awesome. And like you said, you have to actually paint the miniatures and build terrain and everything like that.
Yeah, so it was really daunting for me. I was really nervous about. I think that's one of the reasons I was a little bit hesitant about jumping into it, is because I didn't think I could do that. Because my husband is amazing. When you look at his paint jobs, I mean, he was doing, Warhammer for years, and he's painted D&D models. So my first unit compared to what I am now is completely different. So it was quite intimidating. And as a woman, I just didn't feel that was like my thing. But I went along and said, okay, we're going to do this. It'll be fun. But now I absolutely love it. So right now I'm working on my German Grenadiers. I have a team from the Band of Brothers box set that I purchased. My son's going to build the U.S. Airborne. I'm finishing up the Germans with a half track. So I finally just got them all assembled today. Now I've got to do the first paint for the base coat. So it's an investment in time. It's not just something you can pull out and play. So you have to be passionate about it because it takes a while.
I've played Dungeons and Dragons. I've always had miniatures whenever we do like tabletop. I left them unpainted. Just, there's my figure, let it go. I mean, I cannot do the painting for miniatures.
That's how I felt when I first started. But after I finished, I think it was the starter set for the Germans, and it was the German Grenadiers. When I finished that set, I was so proud of myself because they looked really good. I had the bases are based with flock and bushes, and we use a simple paint and dip. Army Painter has this dip where you can dip your miniatures in so it highlights it for you. So it really just made the miniatures pop. And so far now, I've got probably, I think, 40 German soldiers that I've finished, along with 8 tanks, I believe, I think is how many I have now. And the tanks are camouflaged. It just looks really good.
And how does the game play? Like, do you set up your dining room table and you get terrain and everything out and you measure with rulers, or is it something different?
Well, we actually started with a 4x4 table, which I built. So I've built all the gaming tables along. My husband helped, of course, overseeing to make sure I didn't cut off a hand or anything. But so we built 2 4x4 tables. One was a city board and one for out in the countryside. We realized quickly that with the 4x4 table and the amount of terrain that we had, we just were running out of room. So I recently finished a 4x6 table, which is perfect. So we have room for all of our buildings that we've built. We use the Dave Griffin templates where you can print out, and they're full color. We use foam board to make them a little bit more sturdy. So when you're looking at our tables, it's very, very realistic. So you can immerse yourself in the game. And then once we get the table set up, we use rulers because you can. The movement is in 6 to 12 inches, along with measuring. If you're shooting with an LMG or an MMG, they have certain distant requirements, so you're using a ruler. Okay. Then we used to use a set of 6-sided dice for our rolls. We have poker chips that we use for the order dice, so each unit gets an order dice, which can be, I think, the most stressful part of the game, because you can have your opponent, depending on how many units they have on the table, which are usually we set a point system, so you can have 1,000-point army, 500-point army, 200-point army. But depending on how expensive your units are, I've been on the other end where I've only had like 3 or 4 units, and say my husband has like 7 or 8. So it gets a little nerve-wracking when you realize you have no more order dice and it's all him. Please don't kill my units.
Right, like you've taken your turn, and now you're just waiting for the onslaught coming from him. From him,
but you feel that pressure. It's that intensity of the game, and you get so immersed and involved with your units and trying to strategically plan. And my husband's a brilliant strategic player, but he gets me every time because I'll do something and he'll go, I don't know if I would do that. And I'm like, why? And he'll give me a reason. I'm like, oh, you're right. And then the next turn, my guys are taken out, and he just says, you're so gullible. It's his smile. I'm blaming his smile. So I'm trying to be hardened to his wiles now.
There you go. Yeah, I've gone into like tabletops or gaming stores or comic stores that do like Warhammer, or they do like the mech combat and stuff, but I've never seen any actual like true wargaming done. But it's nice to know that it's still out there. Yeah,
we have a great there's 2 gaming stores in Sacramento. I live about a half hour from Sacramento. We have Great Escape Games, and then we have Viking Hobby. And Great Escape Games, they have this huge back area where they have open gaming, and bolt action is a huge part of that. So they have meetups with people playing bolt action every week. So for our area, it's a huge game.
That is awesome. Mm-hmm. I know here in Orlando, the one local place closed down. So there's a few others, but they're not as close to me as I'd like them to be.
Right.
But they're more for, I know they have some Star Wars, like the Star Wars Fantasy Flight miniature games,
right.
but more, they're still more like Magic the Gathering or Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh! And
yeah. That's big here too. X-Wing is huge. My son and I have played in a couple X-Wing tournaments because we're huge X-Wing fans as well. So we have loads of X-Wing miniatures. Interesting part about X-Wing is when I went, I think I was the only woman that was playing. So it was interesting. It was interesting for my opponents too, because they got kind of nervous. And I just go just to play. I don't care if I'm winning or losing. And I'm not an expert on the rules either. So,
right.
It's like, okay, whatever you say. But I beat this one gentleman, and we were like the 3rd round in. And I think the person who was leading the tournament was like, oh man, she beat you. And he was like, I think I'm going home now. He went home because he could have played the next round and he didn't want to. And I was like, well, he didn't have to go home.
Right.
But he was like a really avid player. And here comes this person who's just like, oh, okay, we're just going to have fun.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You just go to have fun. Like, it's not anything. I mean, there are the people that are just into it and they do it and that's what they do. But you gotta remember, just have the fun.
I think that's the most important piece. I think that was the only game I've won at a tournament, and I've lost all the others. But it was just a really good experience to play. And then too, everyone was really helpful if I didn't understand the rules or, And with the tournaments, though, you have to keep up on all of the new, especially X-Wing, all of the new ships that are coming out because the ships are more powerful. So if you just stick to your, good old X-Wing or B-Wing or Y-Wing, you're going to get blown out of the water.
Right. I know the gaming store that was here before they closed down, they had found this a cooperative campaign. So everybody piloted one ship in the Alliance, and they would run you through this campaign of missions that someone had created. And I'd bought the basic starter just to get the X-Wing. And they're like, well, what cards do you want to attach to your ship? And I'm like, I have no clue. I have this box here. I don't have all these cards that you guys have of like all these latest releases and pilots and weapons, and I'll just stick with what I got in the box.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the reasons we've kind of slowed down with X-Wing, because you can't maintain your force and expect to play at tournaments or even in a gaming group, because everybody's buying all the new stuff. Whereas with bolt action, my force that I have now with my German soldiers, with my Fallschirmjäger and my Waffen SS and my Grenadiers, I can play those for the next 5 years, and it's not an issue. Yeah.
Right. It's always, I was talking to someone about Magic the Gathering, and she said, it's those people who want to buy the cards to make those killer decks to win. Yep. And it's whoever's got the most money to do that and to invest in that time and everything else.
Yeah, that's right. And, tabletop games are not cheap either. I mean, Warlords and the bolt action game, it can get pretty pricey. But now that they come out with the plastics, it's a lot more affordable.
Yeah, that was one of the other things. I remember somebody asked me to get into a game way back in the day called Mage Knight. And I said no, because like one like medium sized unit was like $30 or $40, and I'm not investing that. Like I'll buy a role playing tabletop RPG book for $40,
right?
Over a miniature, basically.
I think I've come to the point where I am in my own normal day job is that I have room to play. Like with bolt action, I can go out and get a couple armies for the family and we start playing. So I'm grateful for that because it keeps us busy.
Right, exactly. Now, one of the fandoms that you were talking about as far as like a TV show goes is the show called Vikings. And yes. I think you're only the second person that I've had on that has listed Vikings as one of their huge fandoms.
I absolutely love the show. I've been with it since it first came on. I was so excited that they had created something like this. And I'm a huge fan of Bernard Cornwell anyway. I had started reading the Northman series, which is what, actually The Last Kingdom is based on. So I was a huge Viking fan already, and then they came out with Ragnar Lothbrok, who is if we look back in history, he is a true Viking king. So to have this on TV, I was just like, I am so excited, especially to see I think it was the trailer where he was on the battlefield and he sees Odin, the Allfather, and I was like, okay, I'm watching this. This looks good. They did a really good job of subtly bringing in the Norse spirituality of the time into the series. And at first you think it's going to overtake the whole series, but it doesn't. It just plays a small part. So it's not like a supernatural series. There's a couple interactions that he has that we all have, if we're spiritual. But just the authenticity of the set, the battles, the axes, the shields, it's really, really good.
Yeah, I remember when they had that trailer come out and I was like, oh, this looks like, I think I equated it to like, oh, it's Game of Thrones, but with Vikings kind of.
Yeah.
And I remember I remember either like DVRing the first episode or two, but then never watching it because there's always so much to watch and so little time to actually watch it. And I just was like, oh, I'll catch up on it whenever it finishes up. And it's still going, which is fantastic.
It's still going. Yeah. I don't think they thought it was going to make it past the first season. Some of the interviews that I've read with the writer of the show, he actually thought that he was going to kill Ragnar off in the first season and then realized that he couldn't because the season was taking off. One of the main characters that jumped out for me was Lagertha. She was Ragnar's wife. From the beginning, and she was with him as he acclaimed the earldom and then becoming the king. I won't go into too much of the series because there might be other people that haven't seen it, but she was a shield maiden in her own right, and she's just such a powerful character that drives the series. So she is by far my favorite.
Okay. I was going to ask who your favorite character was, and you beat me to it.
Yep. And I don't know what's going to happen in season 5. So hopefully she's around at the end of the season.
Now, is every season different as far as, or is it like a continuing storyline from season 1 to season 2 to season 3, and they're just building on the story, or are they changing it up each season?
They change it up a little bit each season. The first 2 seasons were pretty consecutive in a timeline, but it was I think at the end of season 3 where they jump ahead. And so when you get into season 4, you're kind of like, what just happened? But I think it jumps forward, like, I'm going to say 10 years maybe.
Okay.
So you have to watch it and stick with it so you know what's going on. And so it's not just like the town that Ragnar and Lagatha, when he takes over as Catacut, but it also talks about the first raid into England, or Mercia at the time. So it jumps back and forth between Mercia and then when they want to sack Paris. So there's all kinds of different storylines playing out.
The sacking of Paris. I don't think I've ever heard about that, but I mean, maybe
one of the characters, Rollo, who plays Ragnar's brother, was actually when you look back in the history, he was the great-great-grandfather of William the Conqueror, who settled in Normandy. So he was a Viking who conquered, or I wouldn't say conquered France, but they gave him part of France. Here you go. Just go play over there.
Don't come anywhere else.
Right. Which turned, so when you're looking at the Normans, they were actually Vikings. So
right, because I remember, back in my way back high school days, that was always my favorite part of medieval history, was like the Norman invasion, so to speak, where, they've all got long hair and they're going to go fight and do their thing.
Right. And when you look at that invasion of, I guess, England from Normandy, Harold sometimes is played out to be this weak king or weak warlord. He really wasn't. He was fighting 2 battles at the same time. So he was stretched pretty thin. But he was quite a warlord in his own right. And I don't think we give him enough credit nowadays.
And Vikings is on FX, correct? Or am I mistaken?
It's on the History Channel.
History, that's what okay.
Yeah, so it's on the History Channel. So I think you can stream it live from the History Channel. They've done a really good job about, if you go to their website, you can watch it after it airs for free, or you can, with your cable subscription, if you have the History Channel, you can watch it there. And I think Hulu also carries it as well, and Amazon Prime.
Awesome. I'll have to pick that up on Amazon Prime then, because I've got that and I can stream stuff.
That's right.
Is there a particular season that you liked the most of what's aired so far? Season
4. Yeah. It's when Lagatha kind of has her day. Payback is brutal in her world, and she had her day. You also get to see Ragnar's sons grown up. So you've got Bjorn, Ivar, Sigurd, and Ube, and you get to see them as men and how their relationships have grown. And Ivar, the Boneless, who is a fascinating character because he's crippled. So he has no capability to walk, but he is the most brutal out of the 4 brothers. Very smart, very intelligent, and has a strategic battle mind. And so the actor who plays him is just brilliant. And I think
watch it now.
Yeah, I think he is actually from Norway. So, but yeah, he's really good.
Yeah, Vikings is always one of those shows that pops up, and I want to watch it, but then either I don't have the time or I'm in the middle of something. And yeah, and I was kind of surprised after the first season that they brought it back, because it's not a show, on History Channel. You don't expect them to actually have a show a show like that,
Right. And it's filmed in Ireland. And the one thing I noticed about Bernard Cornwell, when he allows his books to be turned into TV series, like he also wrote the Sharp series, which was about the Napoleonic War. And the BBC did a series called Sharp's Rifles with Sean Bean playing Sharp, which is an amazing book series and TV series. I highly recommend it. They go all out. So not only with the Sharp series, you've got The Last Kingdom, and now you have the Vikings. They all have that same cinematic feel where they're looking for authenticity. So
very cool. So everyone check out Vikings if you aren't doing it already. Again, we're going to dive into this book series, the Iron Druid Chronicles, and it's just so funny that's like, between that and Dungeons and Dragons is how we connected.
Yep.
How did you get into that book series? Were you like an initial book reader, or did you like hear about it through somebody else?
Well, it was actually my husband who we were actually looking for books, audiobooks to purchase, because when we're, not bored, but just, relaxing, taking a nap, we always put on an audiobook. And we've been looking at the Iron Druid series for a while, and we finally decided to go ahead and get it. So our first taste of the Iron Druid series was through the audiobook. And the minute we started listening, we were hooked. A lot of it has to do with Luke Daniels, the way he brings Atticus to life and Oberon. What I loved about the books were Kevin's attention to detail pertaining to the pantheons that he's discussing, whether it be the Celtic pantheon, the Norse pantheon, the Slavic pantheon, Perun, one of my favorite characters out of the book. He really did his research. So it was nice to see an author that understood what he was talking about while making a fantastic story.
Absolutely. Who's your favorite character?
The Morgan, of course. He wrote her so well, and the way Luke portrayed her in the audiobook was perfect. So it would definitely be the Morgan. And then after that, it would... Oh, go ahead. It would be Perun.
Oh, no, go ahead. Is Perun after that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite book?
Oh. Right now, it would probably have to be the Iron Druid series. I think my favorite...
I meant favorite book in the series.
It would be Hunted.
Okay.
Yeah, that one. That one was really emotional, really powerful. And the first time I have been angry at the author. What is he doing, and why is he doing this to us? And I remember, because my husband and I were listening to it at different times, and I remember coming home from work, and he says, "Kat, you need to sit down, and you need to listen to this." And he hands me a box of Kleenex, and I'm like, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Just listen." I was sobbing after he made me listen to the chapter that I needed to listen to. And I was like, oh my God, I was so emotional.
What was funny is that one of my close friends introduced me to the book series, and I would update her as I'm reading. I'm like, oh, I like so-and-so character. I like so-and-so character. Mm-hmm. And I really started liking Leaf. I was like, oh man, Leaf is so cool. Like, I think he's a great character. And, talking him up. And she's like, okay, she had read everything already that had been released. And she's like, okay. And she had made mention that there's a big part that Leaf was going to play. And I was like, okay, cool. I like Leaf. I like seeing him in action. And we adopted a thing because we send audio messages to each other every day or every other day. And we always now end it with Leaf sucks because of his actions in that particular chapter in that particular book, where just everything just goes wrong.
Right. And I don't think people were prepared for that betrayal.
Oh my gosh, no. There was as I was reading it, there was no way I was on any level to be prepared for what happened.
Mm-hmm. And Kevin spins a good tale, I'll tell you that.
He does indeed. And he gets you attached to these characters where, again, they're like minor background characters that slowly start to creep up into be these really important characters. And then when something happens, you're done. And you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this has happened. Exactly.
I think Owen's another one that's going to be like that. Not that he's going to betray anybody, but he's a really powerful character that I've come to really like.
See, and that's the thing, is that I don't like Owen. I don't connect with him on whatever level that people like, Kevin Hearn or whatever wants me to connect to him. I think he's from a time period where he's not with it and he's trying to do things in a very old tradition. I'm like, come on now.
Mm-hmm. My husband feels the same way. He doesn't like Owen either, but I do. I'm just like, I do like him. No, I was just thinking because he starts, when he starts out as an older man and he, of course, becomes younger, in your mind's eye, you're like, what does he look like now?
Right.
Yeah.
And, I wasn't expecting Owen to be found where he, like, when and where he was. I is kind of almost out of the blue.
Right.
Like, I wasn't expecting that to happen at all.
Neither was I. I didn't think we were gonna see that character, just hear the flashbacks. But now that he's here, it was interesting, and his relationship with Greta, and how that kind of expanded and broadened to what he's doing now. I thought it was a really good storyline, and I'm looking forward to see what happens next. Absolutely. I know there's probably I think there's only one book left.
That's
I'm
correct.
Not sure.
There's a short story book coming out on July 11th called Besieged, and it's going to have 9 short stories. And then the official book, Scourged, comes out sometime, I think, at the end of the year, maybe?
Yeah. We're looking forward to that. But it'll be sad when it ends.
Right. It is going. It's one of those series where I want to know more about what's happening, but I don't want it to end, but I know it's going to have to.
Yeah, exactly.
And I know at our book signing that we went to for Staked, back, I think is sometime December or January. I think it's probably like mid-January, late January of 2016. They had brought up, someone had asked in the audience about, what did, because Jesus is a character in the book.
Oh, yeah.
And they'd asked about like, what did Jesus mean? Atticus, don't do this. You'll inherit the earth basically if you don't do what you're going to go do. And obviously Atticus ignores that and does what he does. And apparently, as far as what Kevin said back then, that question will be answered. Finally.
Yeah, because I was curious as to what he meant by that.
Yeah, it's an interesting. It's going to be an interesting end of the year for when everyone's reading through and connecting all the pieces
to the final story.
Now, have you read the short story, the Oberon's Adventures?
Yes, the Purloined Poodle.
The Purloined Poodle, yes.
Yeah, we got the audiobook because, of course, now we are hooked on the audiobooks. But yes, we thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, because I got the actual book because I don't have any of the audiobooks, but I was laughing so much reading that book.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It was great. And have you listened to the audiobook? Have you heard Oberon's his character, how Luke Daniels portrays him?
He does not match up to how I think he is.
Ah, okay. Interesting.
But I do like it as like it's a totally different take on, because I think like Oberon is like very slow and a very slow drawl and everything, and totally different with Luke Daniels.
And what's hilarious is Luke Daniels has now he's got a Facebook page, and so he'll do Facebook Lives where he's reading. He'll do readings, and Kevin allowed him to do a reading of the Purloined Poodle, and his facial expressions match the voice, so you get to watch him, and it's like his face is so animated when he plays Oberon.
Yeah, I always like getting like whenever I'm actually on Facebook to catch it. It's always fun to listen and watch because it's just so, it's like a behind the scenes, and you get to see it and hear the voice. It's just so much fun.
Yep, exactly.
Again, Kevin Hearn's been on this podcast. If you want to take a listen to his episode, I know I'm plugging this in the middle of your episode, so I apologize.
Fine.
But
No.
But it's something fun, and hopefully people get out there and start reading, because it is a really enjoyable series, especially with all the different pantheons coming into play and overlapping. And I mean, I know that I think it's Hunted is the one book where I feared for everybody's lives at that point.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And I think he does a couple collaborations as well. I think one of the books is called Unfettered, where there's multiple stories. I think that was for the author that had cancer. So all of the proceeds from the book were going to help his medical bills. So he has a Iron Druid story in that book.
Okay, yeah, because I know he does several, like he puts out little novellas or short stories in books that are, right. I'm seeing right there, The Chapel Perilous.
Yes,
is the short story in the fantasy anthology Unfettered.
Yep, that's a good one as well.
I don't think I've read that one. I've only read a few of the short fiction works, just because they're spread out across different anthologies and short novels and stuff.
I think he gives us the novellas to keep us entertained while he's writing the other books. To give us a taste.
Yes, absolutely. Let's see here. So we've covered Vikings and Bolt Action and Iron Druid. And one of the other things that you do besides the wargaming is you do tabletop role-playing.
Yes, we do. We are huge D&D players. We've had a D&D campaign. We've had a Star Wars campaign. My husband has been into D&D since he was a kid. So he kind of introduced that to myself and my son with a couple little teaser games. And then he turns to me and says, I've been a DM my entire life and I've never played as a player. So now that you've got the hang of it, I want you to be the DM so that I can play. So I thought, I can do this. It was one of the hardest things I have ever done, but one of the most enjoyable. I didn't realize I started with the Hoard of the Dragon Queen. So that was, I think, probably 4 books ago, the campaign that they had out. And so we started off, it was just the 2 of them. So I had to have a couple NPCs to play, but they took me places where I didn't think we were going to end up. It was hilarious. Their decision making was completely opposite of what I thought they were going to do. So I had to really learn how to fly by the seat of my pants when it came to being a DM. They were conniving. They were strategic. They didn't. My son was a barbarian called Kohane. We couldn't call him Conan because that was already taken. So he was Kohane the barbarian, and my husband was Bolin the druid. They converted a whole army of kobolds into being good people and working alongside the village of Greenhaven. They managed to slay the Dragon Queen, and it was about a year-long campaign.
Okay.
So we started playing it at home. And then we decided, well, why don't we go to our local gaming store, because they have rooms for rent, to get us out of the house and kind of into the game store, seeing who else is playing, meeting new people. So then we started meeting every other week at the game store. So we would rent the little room that they had for D&D. Even if it was just the 3 of us, we would just to get out of the house and take a ride to SAC and sit in the game store all day.
That's awesome. And yes, as a DM occasionally, all your planning, all your hard work, and I mean, there's several like different web comics and stuff out there where it's like it shows the DM working and crafting the greatest game, and within the first minute it's just totally completely disregarded gone. And that's it.
And I think there were a couple of times with one. I know I can remember one time with my son who was really attached to the kobold that they befriended. His name was Dagger, and he was really emotionally attached. So I threw a curveball, and after a battle, the one of the enemies had a bag, and he threw the bag to Kohane, and out rolled Dagger's head. He was gutted. He stopped and said, "Mom, how could you do that?"
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was the look on his face. He was so upset. But Dagger did come back because there is, I think, a spell of regeneration of something that, and the druid brought him back to life, but he came back to life as a halfling. So, but that one moment of just pure shock that I did that, it was so worth it.
You're horrible.
I know. I'm the horrible DM. Exactly. Oh, that was talked about for a couple days. It was like, I can't believe you did that, Mom. It was Dagger. Why did you do that?
What is it about Dungeons and Dragons that you enjoy getting to do, either DM or as a player?
I think it's the allowing my imagination to take over, because we get so immersed in the story. I'm a huge fan of storytelling, and I get extremely attached, and I'm able to kind of move into that story. So when we're playing, even playing bolt action or playing a different, like X-Wing, or I'm in the story. So I'm on that battlefield, or I'm fighting that dragon, or it enables me to go to a different place, I guess, because sometimes life can be kind of boring, but D&D is really exciting. So I'm walking around every day going, I am the paladin to the Raven Queen. I have my sword and shield. But in my real life, I do martial arts. So I do eskrima, which is stick fighting. So it's kind of like sword fighting. So,
okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite race or a favorite class that you enjoy over others?
I love the drow. I really, really like the drow. I've played a drow ranger, I think a couple years ago, way back in the beginning. But I'm a fan of the Druid series by, I love Druids, and the drow fascinate me, even though they're supposed to be horrible people. Dritz is a good guy, so there may be more. But yeah, the drow are my favorite.
Okay. And any particular class, or just anything?
I really like the ranger class. I think it's because of the archery and the bows and being kind of one with nature. That appeals to me. We do bushcrafting. We're out in the woods a lot. Haven't taken up archery yet, but it's on my list. But I do like that class. The paladin is a new class for me that I have to kind of figure out how my character's going to play out.
Right.
So.
I know for me personally, I always stay away from either the paladin or like magic using classes.
Right.
Not cleric, but like wizard or warlock or sorcerer. Like I tend to stay away from them because it's just, for me, it's almost too much bookkeeping as far as, okay, how many spells do I have? What do I need to get ready? But I'll play a cleric or I'll play a druid because it's not as
much spell intensive. Yeah.
Right. And then paladins, we have or at least I have a special memory of playing 3.5 D&D in college, and the person playing the paladin was being such a not very friendly to the rest of the group that the entire group left his character and said, "We are not going the way you are going anymore."
Wow.
Because I don't know. I was going to say, I don't know with 5th edition if paladins still have to be lawful good or not. But I think in that edition they were. They were.
I think you can pick your, whether it's, chaotic neutral. It doesn't specify, because there are, now with the new book, there are oath. The paladins have to take an oath. So one of them is the Oath of Vengeance.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so I think I have the Oath of Vengeance, where, so my paladin she respects the balance of life and death. Mm-hmm. So she can't stand people that are trying to play with that balance. So for instance, the undead, or she immediately wants to put them back into the ground, let them go on, make their souls at rest. And that's the job of the Raven Queen, to move from life into death. And then once they cross over, it's out of the hands of the Raven Queen. So my character, Rin, that is her thing. She just can't abide by people playing with the undead, which gets her into a lot of trouble this last time I ended up battling a whole group of bandits because they were toying with an undead. And then I got us arrested too. So she has this very moral stance when it comes to not following the order of nature. So, but yeah.
Okay. I have the 5th edition book. I need to probably read it at some point, but I just don't have any games to play with people in 5th edition.
Right.
That in time. It's always, finding people, and then the timing is always never in my favor.
I think finding people is the hardest thing. I'm thankfully that we have myself and my husband and my son, he's 16, who still likes to role play. So we play with each other, but we always, every once in a while, go, it'd be really nice to have someone else come into the game. But it's hard finding someone that can commit to a campaign, or finding someone that you're compatible with. There's, especially in the town where there's not a whole lot of D&D players. So.
Right. I know how that is.
Yeah. And, you get the eyes glazed over. So if you're at work and you mention, oh, we played D&D this weekend, they kind of look at you like, what? What's that?
Either that, or they're like, that's still around?
Right. It's like, yes, it definitely is still around. But I think with shows like Critical Role and the show that you mentioned, the Venture Maidens, I think the more we see this, the more it's out in the open, the more people are going to want to try and play, because it is a lot of fun.
Right. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about just for a little bit, is that, nowadays D&D specifically is having like this really big resurgence. And I'd mentioned Venture Maidens, which is an actual play podcast. And then there's Maze Arcana, which is it's actual play, but it's, let's say, like on Twitch or YouTube.
Right.
And one of the players or storytellers is a woman, and they have tons of female participants, and it's definitely becoming something now where you're seeing more women play tabletop or board games and getting involved in this, whereas they might not have been even like 10 or 15 years ago. Right.
I think a lot of it has to do with women's roles in society. I mean, 10 or 15 years ago, depends how much time you have, because you're either going to school or you're getting married, you're having kids, you're being the mom. There isn't a whole lot of time until you're, either you don't have kids, or it's when your kids are grown up just a little bit to where you have time to play. But for myself, because I'm going to be 50 in next year. So for women my age, there's not a lot that play D&D or play games, because it wasn't something they were focused on. So I'm connecting with the people that are younger than me, some that are older than me, because it was like my era kind of skipped over the whole D&D and board gaming. But now with the resurgence of like Critical Role, you've got the women that are playing on Critical Role. It's becoming more prevalent, and it's exciting, and a lot of people are wanting to try it.
Yeah, and it's becoming, I think, one of those things that was holding, at least as far as gaming, back is there were some times, and I've mentioned this before on other episodes, there were times where, like, I'd be in a comic/gaming shop, and a girl or woman would enter and be made to feel very uncomfortable being in there. By either the patrons that are in there, and they're like, oh my gosh, there's a girl in here, or even the people behind the counter would be very discounting of what that person's in there looking for.
Exactly. The one thing I can say is that's one of the reasons I was a little nervous getting into Bolt Action. My husband's been continuously pushing me to get out there and to talk about the game, and that's why I started the blog For the Love of Bolt Action, so that we can show that it's a game that women can play. So I joined the Facebook Bolt Action page. They have been nothing but supportive, because you hear in the video game industry where a lot of women are getting harassed. There's a lot of sexism, but when it comes to the tabletop gaming, I'm not finding that at all. I'm finding everybody so supportive and excited that it's that I'm passionate about the game, that I'm willing to share myself, share my experiences, share my ups and downs of terrain building, and they've welcomed me with open arms. And it was one of the members of the Facebook page that actually called me Panzer Mom. So it kind of stuck, and then I kept getting asked, well, why don't you start a blog about your terrain building, your game playing? So I did. I had a thread on Beast of War, which I called For the Love of Bold Action, which got a huge response. A lot of people giving me ideas and suggestions. So then I just took that and put it into a blog format, and it's been pretty successful. So yeah, I've had nothing but support from all of the men who play Bolt Action. It's actually great. And then what I've noticed over the past couple of months is that more women are commenting in the forum and showing the work that they're doing. Their troops, their terrain building. So it's really exciting to see more women start to say, hey, I'm here and I love this game.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Where can people find that blog at?
It's called For the Love of Bolt Action. So it is www. Oh my gosh, I just went blank. So it's FTLOBA.com. So For the Love of Bolt Action. So it should pop up when you type it in.
Okay, awesome. Let me try that now just to make sure I got it. Yes, there it is.
There it is. Yep. So I'm working on a blog tonight that I've got to finish up. We hacked a game for Bolt Action.
And before I go, you had mentioned something that you do, and it's called bushcraft, right?
Yeah, my husband is a huge bushcrafter. He has been for years. So we started a side business called Shield Ravens, which can be found at www.shieldravens.com. And we're bringing ancient traditions into the modern times. So traditional bushcraft is, you're out in the woods. It's very minimal camping. You're learning how to start fires with ferro rods, and stuff like that. So we've decided to bring in what they used during the Iron Age. So instead of using a ferrocerium rod and striker, we're using flint and steel. Or instead of a rucksack, we're going to take out a bag that would have been made in the Iron Age. So we're slowly bringing these into our modern life to see how it works. But I have a huge passion for this era. So we have drinking horns. We have actual replica knives that were found at some Celtic digs. We've got necklaces and pendants. We're going to be bringing in axes and daggers and swords, all based on replica items. So it's what the Celts or the Vikings would have used back in the day.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So.
Because I'm looking at your stuff now, and I was looking at the drinking horns, and it's just
they're beautiful.
They are very nicely done. Yeah,
we have a wonderful partner in Prague who his specialty is reenactment. So he has a passion for the Iron Age and the Dark Age. And so we've partnered. So he handles all of our drinking horns, and he's got a little smithy that he's a blacksmith. So he forges all of the knives. And so all of the crafts that we offer are all handmade. So, which is even nicer. And they're handmade in the traditional way. So,
which is even better.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. And, whenever I think of, bushcraft, I always think of the TV show Naked and Afraid.
Oh, yes.
And I'm like, okay, yeah, bushcraft, naked and afraid, making fires out in the wilderness and trying to survive.
Ray Mears said it best. If you're struggling, you're doing something wrong. Bushcrafting should be relaxing and fun. So as long as you're prepared, it's a lot of fun. We go out for, I think the longest we've been is 5 days. I remember my first trip, I thought, oh, am I going to be able to do this? It was so much fun. And we just packed in. We didn't have tents. We set up our bivvies. I started all the fires with my striker. And, we had to get water out of the river and boil it. And, it was just a lot of fun. But that goes back to just being prepared.
Right, like the Boy Scout motto or whatnot.
Exactly.
Always be prepared.
You always be prepared. You never go into the woods without having everything that you need. And it could be a small pack, but if you got what you need, you're going to be fine.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
So for those of you who are listening and want to check out Kat's websites, there's ftloba.com, which is for the love of bolt action. And then there's shieldravens.com for the lots of very cool like drinking horns and wristbands and talismans and future weapons of choice or other items.
Yes.
And then where else can people find you if not at those two locations?
I also, my Twitter account is, I believe it's the Panzer Mom. It's at the Panzer Mom. So I post, it's been kind of slow lately because work's been so crazy, but I post regularly. I post pictures of our terrain. I'm very active, which is how we found each other. So that's a fun page for me because there's so much. And one of the things I noticed real quickly on Twitter is that there's tons of women that are into gaming and terrain making. So it's really nice to see that on Twitter so that I can connect and be able to share all the awesome work that's being done. So...
Right. When I started this podcast, I had to basically learn Twitter again and certain hashtags or finding hashtags. And then you see them and you start interacting with people and getting to talk to people and building relationships like that are totally different because you have to constrain your talking to like 140 characters or less. But
exactly. I've met some really neat people on Twitter. And it's really nice. And Facebook is a good outlet too, but Twitter's a lot of fun. So,
right. And, there's a lot of people will, if you get something posted nicely, there'll be tons of retweets and you'll meet new people that way too.
I know. I think that surprised me the most when I come home and I'm like, oh my goodness, I have all these retweets. What did I do? My son is a little jealous. So,
well, Kat, I won't take up any more of your time, especially with you needing to get a blog out there.
Yeah.
But thank you for coming on. It's been fun as my first person that I've had, from Twitter, the Twitterverse, to come on and talk fandom with.
Well, I appreciate the offer. I've had a lot of fun, and it's been great talking to you.
Thank you for listening to Tales from the Fandom. Subscribe to us on iTunes or your podcast app of choice. Follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/talesfromthefandom to see photos, links, leave feedback, and check out upcoming guests. If you'd like to be a guest, email David at talesfromthefandom@gmail.com.